So, Steve, one of the main uh, starting points for developing the Neurogenic integration website was our idea around creating a growing library of video educational content
Mm.
centering around the tremoring practice. So let's talk about that. Like, why don't you start with just kind of what we have now,
What
because
we
we're at the
have.
very beginnings of it, and then we'll talk about kind of what's in the pipeline and where we're going with that.
Yeah, right now it's what we have is what we call our foundations course, which is basically a very easy, safe way to learn how to tremor. It's simple, straightforward, um, and available to the ones that should be doing that. I was going to say with of course the safety precautions and in ahead of it, so people know if this is the right way for them to learn.
Yeah, if that's a good, because our view is that, for many people, learning through a video course could definitely be a safe way to get started, learning about tremoring, but then also getting started with the practice itself. And there's a few people a few categories where we recommend doing it through video might not be the best. And so then, of course, we recommend in those situations, beginning with a qualified practitioner. But yeah, no, I mean, but in terms of a simple but informative and a clear beginning for most people, that's kind of the
Mm.
goal of the foundations
Yeah.
course. The trauma informed facilitators course is, just as you said, originally we had a specific audience in mind, which was breath workers. We had been asked to produce this. Um, but then we're sharing it more widely because it basically takes what you and I know both from our TRE education and also from breath work, heart math, and other frameworks as well. What we know about creating safety in facilitation in general. So again, we're in the audience we're speaking to is breath workers, but you could translate this into leading a yoga class. You could translate this into leading guided meditation facilitation. You could translate this into leading TRE or tremoring as well. And so it goes into some of the principles of things like window of tolerance, talking about the helping to discern where people are on the polyvagal curve, and then some of the precautions, the things that might arise when we see somebody going into losing connection to themselves, maybe going into a dissociation or getting overwhelmed physiologically or with emotional flooding, and how to preempt those things from happening or perceive when that's in place, and then strategies of containment and titration and self-regulation. So, and my view is, that course is really, really good for anybody who's in a facilitating role who just wants to know more, and even the history of the trauma-informed movement and trauma-informed principles. We kind of included all of that in this course. But even people who just want to know a little bit more about concepts around self-regulation and concepts
I think
around
it's extremely useful.
titration. Extremely useful, exactly. So I think it's a very accessible course with many people interested. But so then let's also talk about, so we've got other kind of courses in the works. Like we have two where we've done some of the recording, but it'll take, so one we're calling the art of tremoring, and then the other is, I forget, I guess deepening your tremoring practice. Why don't you talk a little bit about those?
Well, the deepening is for personal use. It's
Yeah.
for the people who have taken the foundation course and have been practicing a bit and wants to move further into this. Um, this would be useful also for anybody because there are kind of nice little variations that you can practice in there. It's recorded, it's not up yet, but it's coming. So I think
Yeah.
it's a fun addition to expand your experience and also to kind of trigger your own creativity in how you could play with the tremors and see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, totally. No, that's why that
Mm.
way I look at it too, is sort of like you've begun, you know how to tremor, it's good, and then you're wondering how can I maybe get more out of this? What
Mm.
or get more out of it in terms of perhaps waking up the tremor response more fully in your body, what can we do playing with breath, with movement, with props, different
Maybe new things
positions.
happen.
Right, exactly. Just to sort of, in a sense, what are the dynamic possibilities
Mm.
that and helping to cultivate that. So that's that course. And then how about the art of tremoring?
Well,
What's
the art of tremoring is more like the art of facilitating tremoring,
yeah, yeah,
because it's how can you see what's going on in this person? How can you help this person to move into new patterns, new discoveries? How can you help this person release old patterns that are repeating themselves? How can you basically help them move on and how do you do that guidance? What do you look for? Yeah, so
yeah,
it's
yeah. And then
the
maybe
art.
I'll just yeah, and then maybe I'll just tease one of the courses. We are in conversation with a number of other TRE providers and TRE trainers, and then later maybe we will be looking for collaboration outside of the not only from the TRE world in terms of creating courses, so a few of these conversations are all already underway. But I'll just give an example of one of the ones that we're working with, and this is with a physical therapist in the United States with a broad range of training. But one of his expertises is around nervous developmental patterns through childhood, and then something called reflex integration. And reflex integration is this idea that we are born with a lot of reflexes that we use throughout our lives, but then developmentally we oftentimes will sort of no longer need a particular reflex, and so it's not as active anymore. And but then some people, due to injuries or different kinds of developmental disruptions, sometimes these reflexes, it's called a retained reflex, where it's still showing up it hasn't been, in a sense, sort of integrated into the system. So that could show up through movement patterns or postural things, and they might show up more under stress. And so he has a very experienced eye for observing how when you're working with the body, tremoring or not, you can start to see how these retained reflexes or patterned responses are influencing the person. And so in general, the field of reflex integration, it's sort of part of occupational therapy, physical therapy. But when we combine neurogenic tremoring in there, it can actually really help work with that. So that's an example of a more kind of looking at a sort of a professionally focused course around what are the physical therapists, occupational therapists, what can they teach us, with those of us who are interested in tremoring, bring some more awareness around to this developmental perspective. And so just an example of kind of one of the areas, the focuses that we're going to be kind of working with.